Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I'd like to offer my greetings and welcome everyone this evening. So yesterday I was reading the Vipallāsa Sutta. So I thought maybe I'd speak a bit about this. So it's a very short sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya. So in Buddhism and in the Buddhist text, we have lots and lots of lists. There's lots of, four of this, five of that, eight of these, 12 of those. There's a lot of lists. And this book, the Anguttara Nikaya, is the book where we hold a lot of these lists. It's called the Numerical Discourses of the Buddha. So everything's very numbered, and this is where we have a lot of the lists. So this sutta, the Vipallāsa Sutta, is in the section on the fours. So this word Vipallāsa, so in Pali it's actually more pronounced like Vipallāsa, but in Thai there's no V sound, just a W sound. And in Pali there's no W but a V sound. So just from coming from Thailand, I use a lot of more of the Thai pronunciations of it. So my V's come out as W's. So so the Vipallasas or the Vipallasas, um, so this word Vipallāsa, it can be translated different ways. Some people translate differently. Some translate it as distortions, or some translate it as inversions. And actually, the word itself has actually been adopted into the Thai language. The meaning is a little different than in the suttas. In Thai, it's pronounced Vipalat, and it kind of means like crazy. Like if you say someone's Vipalat, it means they're going through some kind of mental health issue at the time, maybe a bit of psychosis or something like that. And so the meaning has kind of changed, but the word has soaked into the Thai language. So these vipallasas in the sutta, the Buddha said that there's four of them, and he said these four, they're these distortions or these inversions of our perception. They're distortions of our mind, and they're distortions of our views. So these four things are the first distortion is that we see permanence in those things that are impermanent. And so this is something, I speak about quite a bit is this kind of deep view we have, and here it would be a distortion of our view that that things are permanent. So the Buddha, taught us again, he said, sabbe sankhara anicca. So he said all conditioned things are impermanent. And this is just kind of the nature of reality. This is just one of the characteristics of reality is that everything is impermanent. All conditioned things are impermanent. But even when we know that on the intellectual level, a lot of times, deep down on like the felt level and the deeper level is that we perceive these wrong. We view these wrong, and we feel that there is permanence to it. And so we might feel that, and it gives us, a lot of times it gives us a bit of sense of security as well. So we feel that everything, our material things we have are permanent, that they're always going to be here. They're never going to go. That's why, Luang Por Chah gave that kind of one of his very well-known teachings of, he said the glass is already broken. So he was saying, that he had a glass and he was saying, it's just the nature of this glass that it's going to break. So you have to view it that it's already broken because at some point it will break. And so just preparing yourself for that impermanence. And, we have this with relationships, we always feel someone's going to be there. We always feel, or a job, we have a certain security in it. We always have this feeling we're always going to have that job. But then all of a sudden, you know, uh, the company downsizes, or there's an economic downturn, or, we get very ill and can't go to work anymore. And these things change. So they're very much impermanent, in a constant state of flux. And you see this with us and ourselves as well. Our body isn't permanent, it's always changing. So you just think of how your body was when you were a toddler, a baby, versus when you were a child or a youth or middle-aged or gone beyond middle-aged, getting older, and just how much the body has changed. It looks very different, it feels different. They always said that all the cells in your body, that they every 7 years, all the cells in your bodies change. And I did listen to Ajahn V once. He was telling us that he had said that in a Dhamma talk once, and one of the laymen interrupted and said, "Well, actually, Ajahn, some of the cells take a bit longer than 7 years to change. There may but they still do change. So it's even if it's not 7 years, everything in our body is in a constant state of flux, a constant state of change, and even our personality is always changing. You think of those things that you liked, when you were a kid versus again a teenager versus even maybe a few years ago, your values, your things you found important, your likes, your dislikes, you know, how many teenagers, went out and got their favorite band tattooed at one point, thinking they'd love it forever, and then a few years later they have to get it covered up because they no longer like that music anymore. So, that's just showing that, these things are in this constant state of change, a constant state of flux. But again, we always have this distortion, this vipallāsa of our views that it is permanent. And so the second of these distortions or inversions of our views is we see things that are suffering as not suffering. So this is really interesting. When the Buddha first started teaching, and he gave his first discourse, he taught the middle way. But when he went into the Four Noble Truths, it starts off with suffering, and this term dukkha, suffering, it's a very broad term. So we say suffering, but it's a spectrum, all the ways from like horrible, torturous suffering on one hand, and on the other extreme, it's, just stress, discontent, dissatisfaction. So, we look for this lasting satisfaction, this deep, we see that these things aren't suffering, but they are suffering. And so when the Buddha started off the Noble Eightfold Path with suffering, he said, this dukkha, this suffering, this is to be known. So it's one of those things, a lot of times we don't realize things have that nature of suffering in them. We don't realize that there is, even when there's a pleasant feeling, there's more suffering which comes with it, especially because all those pleasant feelings, all of that is bound up with impermanence. So, you get a pleasant feeling, but then it changes. So you lose that pleasant feeling. So you want to get it back. And there's no lasting pleasant feeling you get from anything, except, when you become enlightened. And so the second distortion of view is seeing these things which are suffering as not suffering. And then the third distortion of view is we're seeing things that are not self as self. And so this is something, we're doing all the time. We're constantly, we've created this sense of self, this sense of atta. And so non-self is anatta. So we've created this sense of self, this sense of ego. And we've attached to all these things and we view them as ourself. So, one place we start is with ourselves, with our bodies, these things we take to a self. Like I was saying earlier, we take our body to be ourselves, but when it's always changing, there's no permanent self there. It's just made up of different parts. It's made up of different elements. And then, and it's always in a constant state of flux. And we really don't have that much control over the body. we control some of the movements and stuff, but the body is it's a part of nature and it follows these rules of nature, and it's a natural process that we can influence but we can't really control. Like we can't just by as an act of will say, oh body, you should be like this or stop doing this. Especially you see it when you start getting older, and then all of a sudden at some point the hair starts disappearing, and you can't just as an act of will be like, hair come back or hair stop disappearing. You can maybe do a transplant. You can try to manipulate it like that, but it's still, the body is just going to follow its nature. And, if say you burn your hand, there's going to be a certain reaction, which is just the natural reaction of the body. So it's a natural process, and it's not us, and it's not ourselves, but we're really attached to it, and we see it as ourselves, and we feel that it's ourselves. And so, if something, say, if someone insults it, you're attached to your body, and someone insults your body and is like, oh, hey, Nando, you sure gained some weight there. And, you might get hurt. Instead of thinking, okay, well, yeah, it's a natural process. More calories go in than out, weight's going to go up. More calories go out than in, weight's going to go down. But because we've attached to this and created this sense of self around it, we suffer. And you can see this with other things, like our likes, our dislikes. We really create a sense of self around these. We view these that this is me, this is mine, this is myself. So, the example I always use is, people in sports teams. Someone really likes that one sports team, and they create this sense of self around it. And if the sports team does bad, or anyone insults that sports team, and they take it personally, they're personally hurt by it. They're personally, offended by it. Or we get this with our views. We can really attach and create a sense of self around our views. I am like this, I believe like this, and someone has a different view than us. And, we can suffer, we can be really offended by that, and, constantly trying to convince people or not even let go of our own views. So when I was a teenager, I remember watching this documentary about this lady. I believe her name was Linda Hazard. And I think it was like back in the 20s or turn of the century, somewhere back then. And she had this really strong view about health. And she believed that uh, most illnesses, if not all illnesses, could be cured by fasting, and fasting was the way to cure it. So she set up this little clinic out in the countryside somewhere in America, and when people would get sick, they'd go and stay there, and she and her staff would treat them by starving them and making them fast. I think it was they'd only eat like carrot broth, and they'd all start losing weight. But then what happened was everyone's kept dying because you need to eat. At some point you need to eat. And they kept dying. And eventually she got shut down. I think she moved to New Zealand for a bit and then came back to America, and she started up again. And at one point she got sick. And so she tried to cure herself by fasting. And of course, she starved to death. And so even though, all the evidence all the ways along was saying, no, this isn't working. Everyone's dying who's doing this. She was so attached to this view, and she had so much self around this view that she just couldn't let go of it. And it had very unfortunate results to that. So so yeah, the third of these distortions of views is again seeing those things which are not self to be self. And the fourth one and final one is the distortion of view of seeing those things which are not beautiful, seeing them as beautiful. And so this isn't like, judging someone's perceptions of beauty, like, oh, actually, you don't know it's beautiful, you do, but it's just saying that things aren't intrinsically beautiful. So there's no like, this is beautiful, that is not beautiful. It's things are just the way they are. It's all what we add to it, beauty, liking, disliking, that all comes from us, and it all comes from our mind and our perceptions on things. And you can really see this in in life, like so I think they've done studies that of how the perceptions of beauty have changed over time. So say, in the 1920s they thought this was beautiful, in the 1930s they thought this, and and what they considered to be an attractive person changed over time, and fashion and that changes over time. In the 80s, they even thought that 80s hair was good looking, and so, and so these things, so it's changing over time. There's no one said, this is beautiful, that's not beautiful. And you can see it with other things like, artwork. Some people look at one piece of artwork and think, oh, wow, that's really beautiful. It's so expressive, and, they feel something of it. And another person looks at it and is like, are you joking? Like that looks that looks terrible, And so again, these are all just because beauty, it's just a perception we have. Things are just the way they are. And the Buddha said one time, really beautifully said it. He said, the entire world exists in this fathom long body because our entire experience of the world is through our body, it's through our senses, it's through our eyes, it's through our nose, it's through our tongue, it's through our body, through our ears, and through our mind. So we're constantly projecting these things onto the world. We're seeing these things through our own lens and our own perspective. And you can really look at the way it changes. So sometimes you may be living somewhere or you're visiting somewhere and you're in a great mood. You're having a great day. Your mind's peaceful. You've had maybe a great meditation beforehand. You're just everything's going right, and you go somewhere and it's just, it feels so tranquil. It feels so peaceful. It's so beautiful. And you have that, oh, this is so beautiful here. But then, you can go to the same place and you're in just a foul mood, like you didn't sleep the night before, you got a headache, you didn't get your morning coffee, people are bothering you, and you go to that place and it's just not beautiful, and so it's very much through your own lens where you can see how that changes over time. You might at one point find something very beautiful, like a piece of artwork or a building or something. And then over time, you notice it kind of starts to lose that beauty to it. You start to notice that, oh, that was done wrong, or that should have been like this, or you just get bored of it, and you don't see it as beautiful anymore. So these are the four distortions, the four inversions of perception, the four distortions of mind, and the four distortions of our views. And so when we have these, like, this is something everyone has. This is just the nature of our mind, the way it works. And so we all have these, and we're constantly reinforcing these. So it's one of these things that we can remove through our practice, but it's just there as a kind of a function of the mind. And so it's good. It takes a lot of practice to remove these. And it's interesting, the first three of them, the seeing things that are impermanent as permanent, seeing things as not suffering that are actually suffering, seeing things as self, which are actually non-self. Like these are the three characteristics, impermanence, suffering, not self. And these three characteristics are just are just universal laws about nature. But the Buddha really gave these to us as tools to develop our wisdom. So when we do contemplation, we use these uh, three characteristics as a way to contemplate things, to see things in line with reality, and to break those attachments to it and uproot those deeply held attachments we have, and uproot that fundamental ignorance, and that uh, and those things which are preventing us from being enlightened. So to really straighten our views, so they're distorted, they're inverted right now, but to straighten them out and to get them right, it's going to take our practice. So we can't, it's not something we're going to get through just study alone, or through just kind of an act of will. It takes consistent practice, and it really takes developing wisdom. So, samadhi will help us in our development of wisdom, but it's not something we can get through samadhi alone, or just through through study alone. We have to really work on developing that deep wisdom and the wisdom which comes from our meditation. So I'd like to offer that to everyone as a bit of a reflection this evening.